My name is Layla. I am 34 years old. And on the night of my 10th wedding anniversary, in front of 212 people in the grand ballroom of the Ashford Hotel, my mother-in-law walked across the marble floor in her emerald gown, stopped directly in front of me, reached into a paper bag she had been carrying all evening, and handed me a white kitchen apron. She held it out by two fingers, the way you might offer something to a person you half expect to refuse. Her name was Patricia. She was 61 years old and had spent the last decade making sure I never forgot that I had married into her family, and not the other way around. "I thought you might want something useful," she said. Her voice carried. It always carried. "Since the kitchen is really the only room where you've ever been indispensable." People stopped talking. I heard a chair scrape somewhere to my left. I heard someone, I never found out who, try to muffle a laugh. I took the apron. I folded it in half. I set it on the table beside my untouched glass of wine. I did not say a word. And then the main doors at the far end of the ballroom opened. And the man who walked through them, the man who had flown in from Singapore that morning, the man whose name was on the company building where I had worked for 6 years, stopped when he saw me, smiled like he had been looking forward to this moment all evening, and said my name across the room loud enough for everyone to hear. What happened after that changed every single thing about the night. Before I tell you what really happened in that ballroom, make sure you hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the rest. And drop your country in the comments right now. I genuinely want to know where in the world you're watching this from. There are more of us out there than any of us realize. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. I was 23 when I met Daniel Ashford. Not the Ashford of the hotel. That part came later, in a way I had not planned and could not have imagined. I met Daniel at a conference. He was standing near the coffee table, laughing at something a colleague had said, and when he laughed his whole face moved. That was the thing I noticed first. Not his clothes, not his family name, not the careful way everyone else in the room deferred to him. Just that his laugh was the most unguarded thing in a very guarded room. We were together for 2 years before we got married. They were good years. We cooked together badly and ate takeout 4 nights a week. We argued about small things and almost never about large ones. I thought that was what a good marriage was built on. The absence of large arguments. Patricia was not at the wedding. She had what Daniel called travel complications. Later I would learn that she had refused to come because she had wanted Daniel to marry a woman named Cecilia, a woman she had known since Cecilia was 9 years old, a woman from a family she considered appropriate. I was not from a family she considered appropriate. My mother cleaned houses for a living. My father drove a delivery truck. We lived in a 3-bedroom semi-detached, and I had gotten through university on a combination of loans, scholarships, and determination so sharp it scared even me. Patricia met me for the first time at Christmas dinner, 3 months after the wedding. She looked at me the way you look at something that has been left in the wrong place. She was perfectly polite. She did not say anything unkind. She said everything unkind through tone alone, through pauses, through the way she redirected the conversation every time I began to contribute to it. The specific moment where things hardened, the moment I still carry, came 18 months into our marriage. We were at a fundraising dinner at the Meridian Club. A very formal room. Candlelight and crystal and a dress code that I had researched carefully. I was wearing midnight blue. I had done my hair. I felt, for the first time in one of these rooms, like I belonged there. Halfway through the main course, Patricia leaned across the table and looked at my wrists. "No jewelry," she said. "I prefer it simple," I said. She smiled the smile she kept for exactly this kind of moment. "That's one word for it, I suppose." She looked back at her food. "You could at least try to look expensive, darling. People in rooms like this notice." Daniel heard it. He did not say anything. He moved the conversation somewhere else with practiced ease, the way people do when they have spent a lifetime smoothing over the things his mother said. I loved him for trying. I was not yet angry at him for not doing more. That came later. The line stayed with me. "You could at least try to look expensive." I thought about it on the drive home. I thought about it in the bath. I thought about it at 2 in the morning when Daniel was asleep and I was lying in the dark making a list of every room I had ever walked into and wondered whether I was supposed to be there. The years that followed had a texture I find hard to describe. Not terrible. Not cruel in any dramatic way. Just a slow, consistent pressure. Patricia at every family occasion, adjusting the temperature of every room she entered. Comments about my cooking, not the quality, the style. Comments about the way I decorated our house, not with hostility, with pity. Once, at a Sunday lunch in the 3rd year of our marriage, she looked around our kitchen and said to Daniel, in front of me, "She hasn't changed the curtains yet." As if I were a tenant who had been given a home on trial. Daniel and I were not unhappy. We were adjacent to unhappy, which is sometimes worse. I had been working at Vertex International for 3 years at this point. It was a global consulting firm with offices in 14 cities. I had joined as a mid-level analyst and I was, by every measure I could find, very good at my job. I worked 12-hour days when the project required it. I traveled. I learned. I failed at some things carefully and learned exactly what not to do. My performance reviews were the best on my team for 2 consecutive years. And then something began to happen at home that I had not seen coming, perhaps because I was looking in the wrong direction. Daniel started traveling more. That was fine, his work demanded it. But he started talking about Patricia differently. More. Her opinions, her concerns, her vision for the family. He started using phrases I had never heard from him before. Phrases like, our legacy. Phrases like, the right environment. I would come home after a 16-hour day in November and find him on the phone with her, and he would see me walk in and something would shift in his expression. Not guilt, exactly. Something adjacent to it. The conversation happened in January. It was a Wednesday evening. He had made dinner, which was unusual, and set the table properly, which was more unusual, and when I sat down I knew before he said a single word. He said he had been thinking for a long time. He said he cared about me deeply and always would. He said, and this is the part one remember with the sharpest clarity, the part one replay sometimes when I need to remember exactly what it felt like, he said, I need to be with someone who fits this life, Layla. I don't mean that unkindly. I just mean you and I are building different things. I did not cry. I think he expected me to cry. I asked if this was his decision or his mother's, and he said it was his, which was true enough that I did not press it. 3 weeks later I signed the papers. I drove away from the house we had shared for 9 years. My name had never been on the deed, that, I later realized, had also been his mother's suggestion, with 3 boxes in the back of my car and no idea what I was going to do next. I sat in the car park of a Tesco for 40 minutes before I could drive. The heating was broken and it was very cold and I could smell the takeaway coffee going cold in the cup holder. I did not cry there either. I just sat. Then I put the car in gear and I drove. I will not give you the long version of what happened next. It was 2 years. They were the hardest 2 years of my life and also, eventually, the most clarifying. I got promoted twice at Vertex. I bought a flat, a small one, in an unfashionable part of the city, but mine. I stopped wearing borrowed versions of myself in expensive rooms and started wearing exactly what I wanted, which turned out to be simple and pale and comfortable. And I started arriving at difficult meetings feeling more grounded than I ever had in the Meridian Club. I also, slowly and then all at once, became something I had not planned to become. But that part, I will let the ballroom explain. The anniversary party was Daniel's idea. 10 years since they had begun dating, not the marriage, which had ended, the original relationship. Patricia had organized it into something much larger than that. The Ashford Hotel. The family ballroom. A guest list that had expanded from 40 to over 200. Because, as Patricia had told someone at the club, some occasions deserve to be witnessed. I received an invitation 5 weeks before the event. A proper card, cream stock, embossed lettering. No personal note. I turned it over in my hands for a long time. I want to be honest with you about why I went. It was not bravery. It was not strategy. It was something more complicated, a combination of curiosity and a kind of reckoning I felt ready for. I had not seen Daniel or Patricia in almost 3 years. I had been carrying those years with me like something I needed to set down somewhere. I thought, I would like to see the room clearly. From the inside. With nothing left to prove. I wore cream. A simple dress, long sleeves, no embellishments. No heels I could not walk in. The same plain watch my father had given me when I finished university, the one that ran 2 minutes fast, and that I had never had fixed because I liked having those 2 extra minutes in my day. I did not bring a bag that announced itself. I did not try to look expensive. I walked in knowing something that no one else in that ballroom knew yet. Something that had been set in motion 4 months earlier, in a boardroom in Singapore, in a meeting that had changed the direction of everything for me and, as it happened, for the Ashford family too. I walked into that room with the particular stillness of someone who has already won. Patricia found me 40 minutes into the evening. I was near the edge of the room, near the tall windows that looked out onto the garden. The night was clear. The garden was lit. It was, objectively, a beautiful event. Patricia had always been good at creating beautiful things. She was wearing emerald green, a statement color, intentional, the kind of thing that says I own this room before you've said a word. She walked toward me with the deliberate pace of someone who has rehearsed the walk. 3 women turned to watch her approach. She knew they were watching. She calibrated her smile for the audience. Layla. She said my name like a question. I wasn't sure you'd come. I was invited, I said. Of course. She looked me up and down slowly, the way she had always done it, making sure I knew it was happening. You look exactly the same. It was not a compliment. It was never a compliment when she said it. She signaled for someone, a young woman I didn't recognize, to bring the paper bag she had apparently been carrying all evening. I noticed people nearby had begun to pay attention. That was the point. That had always been the point. I brought you a little gift, she said. Since you're here. I thought it was only appropriate. She reached in and brought out the apron. White cotton. The kind you'd find folded at the end of a supermarket aisle. She held it by 2 fingers and extended it toward me. I thought you might want something useful, she said. Since the kitchen is really the only room where you've ever been indispensable. That was when the chair scraped. That was when the laugh happened. I heard a woman to my left say something quiet to the person beside her, something I could not make out but could feel. I heard the pitch of the room change. I saw Daniel, 20 feet away, see it happen and turn slightly away. Patricia was not done. When I took the apron quietly and set it on the table and said nothing, she read my silence as vulnerability. She always had. You know, I never blamed you, she said, louder now, addressing the room as much as she was addressing me. Some people simply aren't built for a certain kind of life. It's not a failure. It's just a mismatch. Like wearing a gown that was made for someone else. You can try to make it work. But everyone can tell. She waited. She was very good at waiting. I hope you're well, Layla, she said finally, with the warmth of someone closing a door. I genuinely do. She began to turn. I said, very quietly, you look wonderful tonight, Patricia. That green was a bold choice. She stopped. Something moved across her face, quick, uncertain. Then she recovered and smiled and walked back toward the center of the room. Around me, conversations resumed. Someone near the bar laughed. The room, which had briefly held its breath, exhaled. I looked at the apron on the table. I looked at the wine I hadn't touched. I looked at the garden through the window, lit and quiet. And then, at the far end of the ballroom, the main doors opened. At first, I thought I'd imagined it. Because the man who walked through the doors was not supposed to be in England this week. He was supposed to be in Singapore for another 10 days. He had told me so himself, in the message he'd sent on Tuesday, apologizing for missing our scheduled call. But there he was. Marcus Wren, CEO of Vertex International, standing at the entrance to the Ashford Hotel ballroom in a dark suit, scanning the room the way he always did, slowly, systematically. The way a person does when they are used to being the most important person in any space they enter and have learned not to announce it. His eyes found me. He smiled. And then he said my name. Clearly. Warmly. Across 212 people. Layla. There she is. Patricia, who had been accepting a glass of champagne from a passing tray, went very still. Marcus walked through the room the way he always moved, unhurried, comfortable, speaking briefly to 2 people who tried to intercept him, not stopping, making his way to where I stood near the tall windows. He reached me. He extended his hand and I shook it, and he looked genuinely pleased, the particular pleasure of someone who has arrived somewhere at the right moment and knows it. You didn't tell me this was the Ashford Hotel, he said. You didn't ask, I said. He laughed. Then he turned, very naturally, to the room. A man I didn't know. I later found out he was Patricia's brother, Robert, a property solicitor, had edged close enough to hear us. He had the careful look of someone trying to work out what they were witnessing. I'm sorry, Robert said to Marcus, with the polite confidence of a man who has never had reason to doubt his own authority in a room. I don't think we've been introduced. Are you a friend of Layla's? Marcus looked at him pleasantly. She's my global head of strategic acquisitions, he said. And as of last month, a partner at Vertex International. One of 6 in the firm's history. He paused. I'm Marcus Wren. I run the company. Robert blinked. His mouth arranged itself into a shape and then changed its mind. Marcus turned back to me unhurried, like none of that had been remarkable. I wanted to tell you in person, the Singapore deal has been ratified. Full board approval. Everything you built over the last 4 months. He shook his head slightly. Layla, the number they came in at, it's going to restructure the entire Asia-Pacific portfolio. It's the biggest single acquisition in the firm's 20-year history. He said it clearly. He said it at a natural volume for a conversation. He was not performing. He was simply telling me something true. The room had gone quiet by degrees. Not all at once. The way a sound fades first at the edges, then the middle, until suddenly you realize everything has stopped and you are not sure when it happened. I heard someone, a woman I didn't know, standing near the adjacent table, say very quietly to someone else, "Who is she?" And the other person said, "I have no idea. But I think she might own this hotel." Not quite. But they were not as far off as they might have thought. Because the Ashford Hotel Group, the building in which 212 people had gathered to celebrate Daniel and the life he had built without me, was one of 3 hospitality assets that Vertex International had just acquired as part of the Singapore deal. A deal I had spent 4 months structuring. A deal I had led. The Ashford family did not yet know. They would receive the formal notification on Monday. But Marcus had wanted to tell me tonight. And he had known, because I had mentioned it in passing weeks ago, that tonight I would be here. He had flown in from Singapore to tell me in person. I looked across the room. Patricia was standing very still in her emerald green dress. The champagne glass was in her hand, but she was not drinking. She was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not the careful management. Not the practiced warmth. Something else. Something open and unprepared. I looked at her for a moment. Then I looked back at Marcus and said, "Tell me about Singapore." I did not watch Patricia for the next 20 minutes. I did not need to. I could tell, from the way the room rearranged itself, what was happening. I could tell from the sound, the specific shift in how people spoke, the lowered voices, the small urgent conferences. People who had laughed 9 minutes ago were now talking in the tone that people use when they are trying to recalibrate very quickly. Robert, Patricia's brother, came back twice. Once to shake Marcus's hand properly. Once to ask Marcus a question about the transition process, a question that revealed he now understood what the acquisition meant for the family's relationship with the property. I saw Daniel from across the room. He was standing with a group of people who had turned partly away from him, not rudely, but with the unconscious physics of a social room that has recalibrated around a new center of gravity. He was holding his drink with both hands. His eyes came to me once. I did not look away. He did. Patricia came to me at the 40-minute mark. She had removed something from her manner, the management, the performance. What was left underneath was a woman who was 61 years old and had just understood something she could not undo. Her smile was smaller now. Her posture was different. The emerald dress looked, in this light, like a costume. "Layla," she said. She stopped there, as if she had planned more and the plan had dissolved on arrival. "Yes," I said. "I hope," she pressed her lips together. "Open them. I hope there won't be any complications. For the hotel. For the family. Given." She trailed off. "Given everything. Given tonight. Given the apron on the table 3 feet away from us, which she could see, which we both could see. She was asking me for something. The woman who had handed me a kitchen apron in front of 212 people was standing in front of me 40 minutes later asking me for something. And she could not bring herself to name it directly. I understood her. I even, in some part of myself that had been growing quietly for 3 years, had compassion for her. She was not a monster. She was a woman who had spent her life arranging things and people and rooms, and for the first time in a very long time, she was standing in an arrangement she had not made. I said, "Acquisitions are handled professionally, Patricia. By the firm. Not by me personally." I paused. "That is not how any of this works." Her lips parted. She nodded. She did not say anything else. She walked back toward the center of the room. Slowly. The room did not part for her the way it had earlier. People were in her path and she had to navigate around them. It was a small thing. It was not a small thing. Behind her, on the table, the apron sat folded in half exactly as I had left it. Nobody touched it. It sat there for the rest of the evening like a thing that had meant to be a weapon and had become something else entirely. I left at 10:15. Marcus was still there. He had been absorbed into a conversation with several people who had connected his name with the acquisition and were asking, with varying degrees of transparency, what it meant for them. He had, I knew, a hotel suite booked upstairs. He would be there until morning. This was not his crisis to manage. It was also not mine. I picked up my coat from the cloakroom. The woman behind the desk said, "Good night," and I said, "Good night" back. The air outside was cold and clean the way October air is in England, sharp at the edges, with the smell of wet stone. I stood on the hotel steps for a moment and breathed it. Behind me, through the tall glass doors, I could see the ballroom still lit. Still full. People moving. A thing that was supposed to be a celebration continuing in a different key. I did not look for Daniel. I did not look for Patricia. I had come to set something down and I had set it down and there was nothing else I needed from that room. I walked to my car. It was a 15-minute walk from the hotel. I had chosen to park that far away on purpose. I had known I would want the walk out. I had known I would want the cold air and the distance and the feeling of my feet on the ground. I walked past the lit shops. Past a man walking a dog who was interested in every smell the pavement had to offer. Past a woman on the phone laughing at something, that particular late-night laugh that means someone has said exactly the right thing. Past the bakery that was already restocking for tomorrow, its windows warm and bright. I thought about my mother. She had cleaned houses for 22 years. She had done it with the same thoroughness she brought to everything, not cheerfully, not resentfully, but carefully. I had, as a teenager, been embarrassed by this in ways I was now ashamed of. And I had, in the last 3 years, understood it in a way I could not have earlier. The particular dignity of doing your work well in rooms where people do not see you. I thought about my father, who drove a truck, who had given me a watch that ran 2 minutes fast. Who had said, at the airport when I left for university, "Layla, you are allowed to be in any room you walk into." He said it the way he said most things, without announcement, without drama, as if it were simply true and he was making sure I knew. I reached my car. I sat in it for a moment. Not 40 minutes. Just a moment. I thought about the apron on the table. I thought about what Patricia had intended it to mean and what it had ended up meaning instead. I thought about 212 people who had watched something they would tell stories about for years, and how the story they would tell was not the one Patricia had written. Then I started the car and I drove home. Patricia had handed me an apron to remind me what she thought I was. She did not know she was handing me the last thing I needed to let her go entirely. She spent 10 years trying to make me small enough to fit inside the story she had written for her family. What she never understood is that I had already outgrown the story. I just hadn't needed her to know it. Until that night, I didn't realize I had, and then I did. My father didn't give me expensive things. He gave me the belief that I was allowed to be in any room I walked into. It turned out that was the only thing I ever needed.